Thank you for coming, everyone. I'm happy to introduce Carsten Dominic, the author of Org-mode for Emacs. Org-mode actually means a lot of things to a lot of people. You can use it as a very nice getting things done day planner organizer, which is what a lot of us on our internal Emacs users list have talked about it. Now, Org-mode also has another interesting aspect to it, which is ease of authoring. Take it from me, I'm someone who's authored markup, LaTeX, HTML by hand for the last 15 years. The last 3 years after I discovered Org-mode, I've stopped writing HTML by hand. That should actually tell you something. So without taking any more of Carsten's time so that we get the best of his time here, I'll hand it over to you, Carsten, and take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Raman, for this nice introduction. And I'm, of course, very happy to be here and to introduce to you my Org-mode package and tell you a few technical things about it, and will also give a short introduction into the package itself. I would like to start asking are there any people who are not Emacs users sitting here? And are there any people who have not used Org-mode before and are just here to find out about it? Okay, that's actually very good. So it will make sense to have a little introduction. Well, Emacs Org-mode is a package which I started writing in 2003. It's an open source project which is also now part of Emacs. Since Emacs 22, it's part of Emacs, and so distributed with Emacs. That's a web page here. If you want to get the latest version, you can grab it from this site and find lots of other information. Well, first of all, working with text files in the third millennium, do we still do this? Why does it still make sense to work with text files? For example, organizing your stuff or for writing little things. And of course, we are not all a Raman who really has a big advantage in using text files, but we have many other good tools. But I still think that text files are the only truly portable format for files. So you can write things down and read it anywhere, read it on a small device, read it on a big device, on any computer, Linux, Windows, on a Macintosh, whatever. You can read it truly anywhere, and that the data will never get lost. So 20 years from now, you will still be able to read these files which you wrote. You can, of course, use grep and other Unix tools to process such files, to search through them, or you can use something like Perl or Python to just run through them, extract the information which you would like to have, and do that. Another interesting thing is that it's very easy to get a history. If you use a version control system on these text files, you can always go back, look at what the exact state of these files was in an earlier time, have very little diff, output of the diff program to exactly see what has changed and when it has changed, things like this. And another thing which I've only found out recently is that you can actually use a version control system with text files to do synchronization. So I actually have my org files on a couple of different computers, at home and on my laptop and on my work computer. And I just use a JIT repository to just push back and forth and pull in order to synchronize. So for a small setup, that actually really works well. Another reason to use these kind of files. Okay. The idea for writing Org-mode started really from a moment when I decided I had to organize my notes better. Because I'm an astronomer, I work at a university, and I sit in meetings all the time. I have to make notes and write things down. And so the idea was, I wanted to organize my notes. And I wanted to organize what I had to do. And one problem with basically all the getting things done and similar tools around, one problem I see is that they really put a task at the central item of these programs. And for me, this is not necessarily the right approach, because for me, if I start a new project, if I discuss with people, everything actually starts with notes. So you have a brainstorming, you make some notes, you put these notes into an outliner, then you organize them and think them over. And in this process, what happens is that the tasks develop. So the tasks then come to be. And I think it's the most natural thing to actually, in your notes file, mark a line and say, well, this is actually a task. Somebody has to act on this. This is something that has to be done. And so the idea is to have a notes file where note-taking really is a fundamental action. So you write in a text file, you write everything you think about, all ideas which you have, everything you might want to do, and then you just mark in that place what you think is a task that should be done at some point. And so I really wanted to avoid separate tools for notes and planning, because I think it's stupid to go just back and forth between two programs just to do these two basic tasks. The other thing is, of course, once you have done a task, you actually have to make a note in your notes file to say, well, okay, this is done, let's move on to the next thing. So it really makes you move back and forth, and I don't think that's a useful way of dealing with things. That was the idea, to start Org-mode. Well, I'm an Emacs user, and so most Emacs users really love to live in Emacs and really don't want to leave it. So am I. So I decided I wanted to start with outline mode. Also, I think outlines are a really great way to organize your thoughts because you can have big categories and then go to the small details in a very nice way. You can really organize your thoughts. Outlines is a good representation of how humans think, I think. So that works really well. However, the Emacs outline mode, I don't know if any one of you has ever used it, I think is really broken. It's just a disaster. Technically, it works internally, so it has actually a nice implementation. The old implementation was really bad. It was just basically replacing all the new lines with a yes and with a Control R, and then just hiding the text. Now, the new implementation internally, the technical implementation is much better, much easier to program. But there's two problems with it. So this is one of those Emacs outlines. So you basically see each outline node has 1 star or 2 stars or 3 stars in front of it, and then you can just put some text below all of these headings. That's how it works. And this works reasonably well if you write a book. So if each of these headlines is some section title or so. But if you also want to use this in a more list-like approach, this is really much harder to read than an ordinary outline where you have proper indentation. So the first thing that I tried to change was making these outlines more readable in a way that we still actually keep the stars here in order to mark things which are an outline node, but they are hidden and they are just actually, they get a font, a face which is invisible or almost invisible in this case. You can still see the little shadow. And you have the proper indentation, and now this outline actually has much more a normal outline list structure. Okay, so that looks better. You can do lists with this. But the place where outline mode really is broken is the user interface. So these are the commands which you use to operate outline mode. And it's just a list of, I think it's 12 commands. Each of these commands has two keys which you have to press. The letters which have been chosen are pretty bad, so I never was able to remember what these commands are. And I just thought it's really ridiculous to have to remember all these commands only in order to fold my outline. If you take another outline program like Microsoft Word, for example, basically all you do is really open and close a node, and then you can dig into this outline. That's nice. It's also nice to have a command to really see everything which is in a tree, but that's all you need. You don't need all these complicated other commands to do this. And so the next step that was happening while I was writing Org-mode was really to compress this entire outline functionality into 1 or maybe 2 commands. And the process which you use now to dig into an outline I call cycling, visibility cycling. So there's really only 2 actions. One is cycle the visibility of a subtree, and then there's another command, cycle the visibility of the global outline, really everything. And so if you now look at the little outline here, this is basically the outline totally folded down now to the top level headings. And now we use these keys in order to cycle through. So I'm going to press 3 times tab, and then I'm going to press 3 times shift tab to just cycle through. So this is the first one. If you have the cursor is here on this first headline. So with 1 tab, you get just the direct children of this outline. And if you want, you can now move the cursor down here and dig deeper. Or you can stay on that headline and press that same key again. And then you just get the entire subtree folded open with all the text below it. That's it. You press it a 3rd time, and you are back to the folded state. So it's really on top it's very fast. You just cycle through this. If you use the global cycling one, the first step actually gets you to something which looks like it's a table of contents. So it shows you all the headings, but all the text below any headings is hidden. And then the next time you press it, you just see the entire file. Everything is shown. And the 3rd time, you just go back to this initial thing. It's really all you need, and it makes it much easier. It's trivial to remember these commands. And so I think that already helps a lot. The next thing which is important if you use an outline to organize your thoughts is that you need to be able to restructure it. Because an outline starts as a brainstorming process. You just sit down, you hack everything you can think of into that outline. And in the end, you will want to organize it so that it makes more sense, that you can derive the actions from this. So you need to easily to be able to do this. And in Org-mode, you do this by just holding down the meta or meta and shift keys. And then you just use the cursor keys. So if you press up, then the entry is moving up. It's going to be swapped with the entry above it, with the sibling above it. If we move it down, it will move down. And you can promote and demote. And that's simpler than any outline program I know in order to restructure these things. And that's basically already the setup which you need for a note-taking application. And then there's lots of little tiny helpful things inside Org-mode which makes it really easy to write notes. So one thing, of course, it improves greatly the standard text and outline modes. I don't use text mode anymore. Out mode is my fundamental mode, my standard mode. So any file which doesn't have a specified mode will be in Org mode, just because it's a nice and easy text mode. There's support for editing unordered and ordered lists. So not outline nodes, but just internally you can have lists with numbers. You can really easily edit them. There's a big part which is hyperlinks. So you can link inside the document from one headline to the next or something like this. And you can also link internally. So for example, if you are working in an email or in a Usenet message in GNUs, you can easily create a link to that message and put it into your org file, which will be a clickable link. If you click it, you are taken back into GNUs to exactly that message. And that works for all the Emacs mail programs I know of. It works for the Big Brother's database, for GNUs, links to files, web pages, to ERC, Unix man pages, info pages, and is extensible. So if you have anything else you would like to link to, that's easily done. For HTML, for example, it will fire up your browser and make you look at that file. Then there is a plain text table editor and spreadsheet. I'm going to say a little bit more about this. This is sort of my favorite hack in the whole program. I had the most fun writing this. Another interesting thing, which I'm not sure how much that is interesting for people, but it is for where I come from. I come from a university. We have to write lots of scientific texts with lots of formulas, equations, and everything. And so note-taking with the computer is really a pain unless you can use something like LaTeX, which is a typesetting system that is used by many mathematical and other scientific journals. And Org-mode actually makes it very easy to write LaTeX, actually in a very sloppy way. You don't have to put in all the math markers. You can basically very easily just write little snippets. You just write \alpha in order to mean the Greek letter alpha and everything. It's in an easy way to type. And then you can transform this later to a PDF file and print your notes in a nice and pretty way. So that's what you need for a note-taking application, and that's what Org-mode gives you.
So for the record, table mode was what finally made me switch from writing HTML by hand to using Org.
Yes, writing tables in HTML is a mess. By the way, obviously, any questions, anytime. I mean, I don't need to go through this talk without questions. We can have the questions during the talk. Okay, and then the next step is what I hinted to earlier. Now you are in your notes files. You have written down notes. You have started to organize it. Now you can identify tasks. And that happens by overlaying metadata over this outline. So here's just a section from a buffer where I have put in all the possibilities for metadata in there. So the first one is what we call the TODO keyword. It's just a keyword, the first keyword in a headline. And in a normal task, in a normal GTD application, this would be basically a checkbox. You can check it off once it's done. In Org-mode, it's actually a little word, and that means you can have multiple states. So many people, you only use to do or done, so that's a checkbox on or off. But you can also have intermediate states. For example, you can say waiting, and that will indicate that you are waiting for the reply from somebody else before you can continue working on it. It means you have already started working on it, but now you are waiting. Or you can say cancel. That means you haven't done this, but you don't actually want to do it. It's just canceled. So this is a single word which can have one of many states, and you are completely free to define what kind of states you want to use here. The next one is a priority cookie. I actually never use this myself. I never really understood the purpose of priorities, but since everybody wants priorities, I put it in, but I actually never use it myself. Because I think you spend more time assigning priorities than it's really worthwhile the sorting you get from it. Okay, the next one is tags. So at the side here, at the end of this headline, you get a number of strings separated by colons. And you are completely free to define what these mean. So if you are working in a GTD environment, this might be context. For example, at computer, at phone, at home, the usual GTD context. But you can also use names. Here I've used buy, something I want to buy, and I want to buy it at Fry's, so I put it here. And this is something for work. So you can just put a number of tags, and that is later useful to find these things back. Then you can have time planning information. And that starts by a little keyword. Anywhere in this entry, you are free to put it wherever you want. Usually it's the first line after that headline. And so there you can have deadline. That means you define a deadline. You can have schedule. That means you want to work on this on a certain date. Or it can be closed, and it will indicate when this actually was finished, this item. So next to it is a timestamp. Here, just a time indication or of a date. And then we have properties, which is just a little drawer, which starts with the word properties and ends with end. And in between, you can have keyword value pairs, as many as you want, freely defined. The metadata remember that we are working in an outline. So this is a hierarchical document. And that means it makes sense to talk about metadata in a hierarchical way. And Org-mode does this in 2 ways. So there's downward propagation, and that's just a different word for inheritance. So if you assign a tag to some outline level, then all the children can inherit this tag. You can also configure it to not do so, but by standard is all the children will inherit the tag. And also the same works with properties. Properties can also be inherited down into a subtree. And there is also upward propagation for properties. So you can have properties being the sum of all the children's values of the same property. In order to set metadata and to edit it and to change it, Org-mode has a couple of special interfaces which are designed to be really fast, so that you can do with very few keys, you can actually change all this metadata. There's a couple of these interfaces. I'm mentioning a few here. There's actually a few more than what is. For example, there's a 1 key per tag interface. So if you switch on the tag interface, you can toggle tags with a single key per tag. So that goes really fast. There's, of course, completion. Emacs would not be Emacs without completion. So whenever it's useful to complete, it will let you complete. For example, if you type a tag name, it will give you completion on all the tags in the file, and in any other circumstances as well. There's also a date time reading function, and I would like to challenge you to show me one where you can actually enter faster a date or a time. This is really, I think, the fastest and easiest way to specify a date and a time, what we have implemented here in Org-mode. And then we have a column view, which is a fast tabular way in order to edit metadata. So just to show you the date-time interface, what happens whenever you have to enter a date and time, there's a little calendar which is put up where you can click, but you can also very easily with the keyboard control this calendar and just jump to a different date. And you can type something like this here, which is +2 Sun 2 p.m., and that means 2 Sundays from now at 2 p.m. So it's just a very short way if you're a fast typer, and then you get this date inserted. And that you can use for setting deadlines and for scheduling items and things like this. And here's the other interface I wanted to show. That's a column view. So you have an outline with a top level and then sub-level things, which are a couple of to-do items. And below these items, you may have property drawers. You don't see them right now. They are hidden, but they may be there. And if you want to edit many of these properties in an organized way, then you just switch to column view, and that gives you a little table of where you still see the outline structure of this entire file, but then as table columns, you get all these different properties like the tags or the to-do state, priority, and these are properties which are defined further down. And you can then easily edit them from this view. So if you, for example, if you have used Omni Outliner, I think that's like the column view in Omni Outliner. It's a similar concept. And you can also then see numbers which are being added up here. That also works in column view. Okay, these are the special interfaces. Well, then the next step is one important part if you try to organize the task which you have to do is that you have an easy way to capture. That's a very important part of getting things done, of any way of planning, that you have an easy way to capture. You get a phone call, somebody walks into your office and throws an idea at it, or it just pops through your head. You have a fast idea, you want to write it down that you don't lose it, but you also don't want to be interrupted. It's a very important part. And for this, we use the Remember package by John Weagley, which is designed exactly for this. So it will pop you into a little buffer where you can make a note and file it away and put you back into the original environment. So that's a very nice tool which John has written and which we just use. We extended it a little bit because you can actually define a couple of templates. So for different kinds of notes, for a task which has to do with an email, for a journal entry, you just set up a couple of templates which make things easier. And the templates can define like that it should be a to-do keyword or what kind of state it should have. It can contain an automatic link. So if, for example, if you creates this task from a certain source code file you work on, then this little buffer can contain a link to that location in the source code file. So if you, for example, notice a bug which you can't work on now, you just make a link that you will go back to this and work on it later. And the template also defines a target location. So unlike in the original Remember, where everything goes to a single file, you can actually select a couple of files or a couple of locations in your org files where you would like to put the note which you get. So let's just set an example. Let's assume what happens to me daily, several hours, that I'm working on org-mode and sitting here in my little Emacs list buffer and working on something. And then there's an idea. For example, I get an email from Raman. He wants me to send the title and an abstract for this talk here. And so it's on a Macintosh laptop, so my email application is open as well, and the message from Raman is the current one, the selected one. I press that template, and I get a little buffer which contains a link here. This is a link to that email. When I click this, Apple Mail will open and show me that email again. And I already know it's a to-do. I can fill in some information, like what is this about. I can put a deadline and the scheduling timestamp and some more information if I want. I press Control-C twice, and that message is filed away in my inbox, where I can then later go to deal with it. That's capturing with Remember. It's a very fast and efficient way, I think. Many people actually use this for many different ways. For example, I have people on our mailing list who have to deal with customers often, who get often calls, which they then can build. So what they do is they have a special Remember buffer, which pops up and immediately starts a clock. And when they file away this Remember buffer, the clock is closed, and so that time will automatically be billed to that customer. So one of the things I'm actually not going to talk about, that Org-mode has a full clocking system in there. So you can clock all the time which you spend on tasks and get tables about this. I'm not going to show this in detail, but it's available.
So for the Google audience, another very interesting use of Remember and org is when you're doing Google searches. So I actually wrote myself templates where rather than maintaining a web browser hot list, you can actually make notes for yourself using Remember as you search and build up a very rich file of search hits and what you read. So very, very nice way of doing it.
Okay. That, I guess, works best if you use a browser which is inside Emacs. Yes, exactly.
Why would you not use it?
Well, yeah, not everybody does, but yes, of course. Okay, so step number 6. We're already at step number 6 in this development. The next thing is, of course, collect and display. Because the problem is, of course, with this approach, we have decided to make a note file and put all the tasks into notes, and they will be widely scattered. Well, you have several files with notes, some for projects at home, some for projects at work, notes from certain meetings, and these all will contain little notes that say something is a task which has to be acted upon. And so now the important task is to actually get these things filtered out, collected, and displayed in a certain way. Yeah, so tasks can be in special lists, they can be scattered over many large files. How to find them? And so Org-mode lets you define queries in a couple of ways. And it has two main ideas on how to display these. And these are called sparse tree and agenda view. A sparse tree is only for a single file and has the idea that you still use the outline tree which you have in that file, but that you hide as much as possible of the contents and only show your matches. And the direct hierarchy above it, so that you still know some context. I'm going to show an example in a minute, but it's a very nice way of finding things which are deeply hidden in an outline tree and still have some information about the context. And the other possibility is an agenda view, and that's actually a flat projection. So even though all your documents are hierarchical documents, this view will actually collect any task or whatever you have selected with your query and put it into a flat list, which does not really remember where in the tree it was. So you can have, if you have a deep outline, you can have on level 25, you can have defined a little task, and that search will actually pull it out and put it into your flat list of tasks which you have to do. So let's take a little example here. I hacked up a little example file. It's just a single file to make things easy, where I have some home task, like clean the garage. I only picked this because David Allen always cleans his garage when he talks about getting things done. You have some work tasks, for example, prepare a Google Tech Talk. Of course, you can define if this is work or not. Let's call it work. Then I have a list where I collect ideas for presents. If I want to give something a present and I have an idea, I put it in that list so that I don't forget. And some media, for example, some books I want to read, some DVDs I want to watch, things like this. This is what you can put out here. And then you can just start your searches. For example, you can make a sparse tree looking for by. This is for the tag by. And then this whole file looks like this. You see in home and in work, everything is folded down. But in ideas for presents for my kids, there are actually 3 little things which I want to buy. So this is a list which you can take with you when you go shopping next time. And also there's a book down here. It also shows up. Well, then you can go to the agenda view. This is what we call the daily or weekly agenda. This is a weekly agenda where you have 7 days displayed. For the current day, there's actually a little time grid, and then I've scheduled my work. There's a waiting task, that means I have to make a phone call in order to get the garbage container to clean my garage. It's basically listed in here. And then there's also the other task that I have to do something. I have to build a rack. So I have a deadline in 19 days coming up. It's just a pre-warning that you have to get started about this because it's only 19 days from now. And then, of course, here on Tuesday, there will be the Google Tech Talk. It's also in this table. So this is just the weekly agenda. You can also focus in on just on the day. That's only limited to a single day. And then you can move forward quickly from day to day. It's just like a normal calendar. The other agenda views actually look at search for something. For example, here's a search for all the to-do keywords. So all the tasks which are not done in that list are now collected here. So there's this waiting task, and then there's also the to-do task which I just showed. Or you can do a search for all tasks with by, and now in this flat list, it's no longer in this outline, but it's in the flat list where you just see all the things which you wanted to buy. And you can just, and the agenda view allows you to work from the agenda. So if you, let's say you start working on this, you actually go ahead and buy a small tent for hiking or something like this, then you can actually tick the task off from this list. So you don't have to go back to the original buffer where it is. You just say here it's done, and then it will be changed here in this list and also back in the original file. Okay, that's basically what I wanted to say about this planning thing. Another big area of org where I'm not going to talk too much about today is exporting and publishing. So you can export and publish all the content of an org-mode file as HTML and as LaTeX. These are both the main backends which we have implemented right now. So LaTeX as a gateway to PDF that makes nice, pretty scientific documents. HTML, and among other things, we have some JavaScript support in there, which actually gives you a very nice way of read a large document on the web. It's very much like Emacs info. So if you work in Emacs and you have the info documentation where you can just, by pressing single keys, zip through the entire info documentation in a very fast way. This JavaScript actually does something like this for working in a web browser. It's a very nice thing written by Sebastian Rose, one of the people who helped me with this kind of stuff, because I have no clue about JavaScript. But you can look at an example at this URL, the file of changes. You can try this out if you want. LaTeX, I already said. There's also an ASCII backend, which is just basically take the org-mode file, which already is pretty readable, but make it even more readable so that it's very nice to send in emails or send to people. It's just a very straight and easy look of that thing. And you can also define whole projects, a publishing project where you link any number of org files and then just publishes as a whole website, interlinked pages. That's a subsystem of org-mode, which works like this. Okay? Then I wanted to talk a little bit about a few tricks which you can do with org-mode and which are a lot of fun. And one thing is that there's a table editor in there. Of course, editing tables in ASCII is normally a big hassle because after each letter you have changed, you have to change all the rearrangements and things like this. In org-mode, you basically can start writing a table by just starting the line with a vertical bar. That character means this is part of a table. And then you just write the different fields. And when you press tab, you are actually in a little table. There's a separator line here. And then you can just go in and fill in all these different fields. And so if you start writing a name, for example, Pete, it's actually Peter, which I want to type here. So until here, it fits. And one of the interesting things is already that org actually doesn't shift these out while it writes Pete. So it actually automatically switches to an override mode while in a table field. And I'm going to say a little bit more about this later. It's a context-dependent behavior of keys. And actually, org makes extensive use of this idea for many of its features. So if I type the R now, of course, then the rest of the line will be pushed out because there has to be space. But next time you press tabulator in order to move into the next field. The table will be fixed and it will look nice again. And then you can just go ahead and just fill it in and put in a couple of people, put in their phone numbers, room numbers, anything like this. And for example, you will notice that the room numbers here are aligned to the right-hand side, so it automatically checks if it's a column where there are mostly numbers, it will just right align it. If it's mostly words, it will left align it. So just these little things make it easy to look at. Then there are very fast ways to edit this table. So for example, if we decide we actually want to swap the columns of room and phone number and actually want to put this last line first, so we just put the cursor here, we hold down the meta key, put left and twice up, and then this table will be rearranged. And so it's very easy to swap columns around, I think much easier than any other application I know. So that's just kind of fun. But the real fun starts a little later. I don't know who of you knows the Emacs calculator package, the calc package, which in my opinion is really absolutely the most amazing program that has ever been written for Emacs. Just totally amazing. It's a poor man's Mathematica and Emacs Lisp.
It's been running since 1991.
Yes.
That's what is most amazing about it.
Yes, and it's really a beautiful program. And so the Org-mode tables actually have a link back into the calc package. And you can, if you want, write in a field just a little equation. For example, here I have a couple of columns, which is a function, and then an n for the degree of the Taylor polynomial, which I want to develop it, and then at the location, at x, or at x is 0 or 1. And then here in this column, I just write, yes, okay, I want the Taylor expansion of this function, $1, with respect to the position x, and then of degree n, that's $2. And I want to have the numbers which come out with an accuracy of 3 digits. And if you put this in, an equation typed in like this will actually be valid for the entire column. So you actually don't have to go down and pull it. If you write it like this, it will be for the entire column, and it will just fill in these little things, all in an ASCII table, which is, of course, this application is kind of funny. But if you just want to add a couple of numbers or do a couple of small calculations or calculate the efficiency of a computer while you have a table which has some running times and things like in here, it's very useful to be able to do this right there in your ASCII notes. Another trick which you can do with tables is something which we call radio tables. And so the way this works is you are allowed to embed an org-mode table into any mode. And that uses the same trick of having context-dependent functionality of keys. I will explain in a little minute how that actually works. So you can put it into any mode, like into a C mode, JavaScript, LaTeX file, whatever you want. And then you can define, it's a single line, you define a translation on how to convert this table into the correct syntax. And you define a location where the transformed table should be inserted. And then you can just edit the org-mode table and the translated table will be changed too. So let me take an example. This is for this JavaScript which we use to quickly view web pages. This is just a little table which defines which keys do what. It's a table which we display in HTML. And since this is JavaScript, of course, somewhere in your JavaScript, you have a location where you define that table. And it's JavaScript, so you actually have to have little strings which you string together here in order to make this little table. As you see, it looks totally ugly. You don't see a thing. So you don't see if this table is correct or not correct. If you have missed something, it's really very bad. But you see that there's 2 command lines here, begin receive org table and end receive org table. And the table has a name, shortcuts, so you can actually have many such tables in a file. And then at some other location, you can choose wherever you want. We have in another comment, in a comment block, we just have a little org-mode table, which defines this table in a very clear way. You can just easily look at it. And here just says org table send, shortcuts, and then there's a transformation step. And so whenever you change this table, the other table will be changed too. And that can be used under any circumstances, and I find it extremely useful. For example, when I make exercises for my students, I write those in LaTeX, and I do little calculations, and I have a little table in there, and I always do it like this, because the table calculates, there's a calculus below it. I can do all the exercise calculations just in that table and have it as a solution in the same document. Go works very efficiently. Yeah, I want to explain one internal technical thing for the people who are actually maybe Emacs hackers and know a little bit more about it. And this is about these context-sensitive keys, of which org-mode makes really extensive use. So many of the keys work different depending on where you are. For example, if you hold down the meta key and use a cursor, it depends on where you are. If you are on a headline, that will do structure editing of your outline. So it will demote, promote, move something up or down. If you are in a table, it will actually swap columns and rows. This exact same keys. The extreme example is a key Control-C, which I use, I think, in 12 different ways. So depending on context, this always means look and update. For example, in a table, it means, well, realign this table and redo all the calculations, something like this. And in other circumstances, it means similar things, but different in every case. The tabulator, for example, it does visibility cycling in a headline. It does motion and evaluation in tables. And it does LaTeX template expansion also. And then even all printing characters use the same thing because they switch automatically to override mode in tables. And the way this is implemented is, well, in Org-mode itself, of course, no problem. I can just bind any key to any function, which will locally look for the context and do the right thing. But the interesting part is, if I allow an Org-mode table to be embedded in C mode, for example, then it gets more interesting because, of course, all keys have some functionality in C mode which you want to be able to use. And so you export the table functionality as a minor mode. And the way this works is that you bind the keys in the minor mode into a wrapper. The wrapper checks for the context. Am I in an Org-mode table, even though I'm in a Java file, for example? When I am in the desired context, then the Org-mode command is executed, and that's it. And if not, then what the wrapper does is actually turn off that minor mode and do a key lookup. Well, what should I really be doing in this mode? And so in this way, you can actually project this functionality into any mode in a completely automatic way. And so here's just a little bit of Lisp code for those of you who understand it. So this is just one of those functions, which is an interactive function. So it's a command, of course. And it does a check. Well, am I at a table? It's just a little function which checks, is this a table? Does it look like a table? If yes, then I call, for example, org-table evaluate formula. If not, then there's a let binding form which actually sets the variable org-tbl mode to nil, which means the minor mode is switched off. And then in the dynamic scope of this let statement, there's actually a key lookup. You look up which key, what should I actually normally be executing, and then this function is executed. And so there's actually two such minor modes, one for the structure commands and one for the table commands, which use this functionality to project these functions into any major mode in Emacs. Another technically interesting thing is also that we have multi-buffer undo. So for example, if we have an agenda file, then and we do something, we can undo it both in the current file and in another buffer. That's another interesting thing, but I haven't really worked this out to show you this in detail. Ask me questions about it if you want later. Okay, I'm getting to the end. So how is Org-mode used today? In many different ways. Of course, it's being used for taking notes by many different people, I think. Then it's being used for tasks and planning, but in many different ways. So some people use it as a simple to-do list manager. So not as a notes file at all, it's just a list file and they just have all their to-do tasks in there, that's it. It can be used like a day planner, and a day planner means you have a page for every day and you put all your tasks on a certain day. So that means you immediately schedule every task. It can be used like this, and a couple of people have used it like this. For example, John Weagley, who actually wrote Planner himself. It's a different software, but that's more like a planner, Emacs planner way of using this program. And so you can do it like this. Or you can do it like getting things done, a la David Allen. So you have to-do states for the main GTD list. For example, the next action could be a to-do state, or waiting, or names, agendas for people. And you can just use the tags for context and agendas and whatever you want. The thing is, it's completely free. You are not forced to use this in any way. You can just decide how you want. You can also do detailed time planning and accounting, as I said. Some people use this as a small database, just use the properties in order to store some data and use it as that. There's quite a few people who actually use it as a way of writing HTML and constructing web pages, writing little manuals, technical documents. It's a very pleasant way of doing this, I think. Or making drafts. For example, very often when I have to write a scientific paper, which has to be LaTeX in the end, I start in Org-mode, write a draft, and when I'm reasonably satisfied and need to go to the file's minor details, then I just export it as a LaTeX file and take it from there. But it's not really all. Basically, people use it as a Swiss Army knife because it does many different things, and you can just apply it to many different things. What Org-mode is not, well, Org-mode is not fiddle-free. So it keeps you fiddling with your system because it allows you to change your system. But on the other hand, Emacs users, I guess if you're all Emacs users, we like this because we like our computer to work exactly as it should be. We don't want to have it a little bit off. We want to have it exactly right. And so I want to fiddle, and that's why I allow you to fiddle with Org-mode. It's probably not for the masses because it's only Emacs users, and we are still a reasonably small fraction of the human population, I think.
Quality counts.
Yes. It's not for VI users. Sorry, folks, but I don't think we have any here. Only a few people switch to Emacs because of Org-mode, but some do. I know a few cases where this has happened. Then I want to have one final slide with a few remarks about evolved software, because Org-mode is a pretty bad example for evolved software. It started in 2003 as a very small project. So the original scope was really take notes, define a few tasks, and that's it. Of course, I put it out on the web and created a mailing list for it, and there's a whole flood of wishes and ideas and whatever comes. 95% of the features were added later, which were not in the original design, just added later. And as you probably all of you know who write code, this can be very difficult. It makes code complicated because you try to be backward compatible and things like this. You don't get a fresh start. You don't get a clean look at an original design. So that can be very bad, in fact. What I've tried to do here is to use two overruling principles. And the first one is to really keep the simple core intact. So the basic idea, you can still take notes with it. You can still mark a few things as being a task. And if that's all you want to do, that's fine. You can only do this. So I'm trying very hard to never impose complexity. So the idea is that you can start using Org-mode in an extremely simple way, and as you go along, you can add little things. But if you stay at the small things, you will never be punished for using a big complex program. And I think that's very often the case with design software. So if people think about it and have a big plan of all the stuff which can be done, then very often you are faced with an input window which asks you for a lot of information which you don't even want to specify because you are not interested in this. And that's something which we try to avoid. So Org-mode doesn't really offer a finished and closed solution for whatever you want. But what it tries to do is to facilitate a learning and development process so that you sit down and develop and learn your own way of getting things done or planning or whatever. This is where I want to stop with a few acknowledgements. First of all, the people on the mailing list, Emacs Org-mode at GNU.org, which is really a great community. I love hanging around there and talking to these guys. Lots of enthusiasm, some criticism, and a constant stream of ideas, which is really what has kept this program alive. Particular thanks to Bastien Gaury, who's a French guy who has really been the second man on the ship for a long time, implemented a lot of things and helped me with many details. And I would also like to thank Andrew Hyatt and TV Rahman and Google for giving me the opportunity to talk here. Thank you very much. And of course, I'm ready to take any questions.
So I have a question.
Yes, I know.
Actually, maybe I'll go over to here. So.
Can I use the mic?
Hello. So I was wondering if there's any function. One of the things I constantly wish for Org-mode to do, because I love to use Org-mode, but unfortunately, some of my colleagues are not so enlightened, and I basically have to collaborate a lot with them on like wiki pages and stuff like that, and is there any way or any anticipated way to like have a back and forth translation so I could export it to a wiki page and then like when I go and edit that wiki page again, I could retranslate it back to Org-mode?
Well, I mean, I don't really have that use for it, so I don't have plans to make it, but I think it's easy to do because it's just a simple, plain text structure. I think it's pretty easy to do. And there is some code from Bastien actually, which we have, which does a complete analysis of the file. So it actually parses an org file into a structured list. And I think it should be very easy to turn that list into whatever format you want. Okay. And to turn whatever format you want back to that list, and then all you miss is a little routine which writes it back as an Org-mode file. So there are actually plans for this, but they are not really very concrete.
Okay,
the
cool.
problem with that particular issue is with wiki. Wikis are sort of deceptively simple in the sense that they claim it's a simple text-based markup. And in some sense, org also is that. but how many spaces make up a list is different in every wiki I know. And so, which one do you pick and how do you do that transform is a hard call.
Yeah, you probably might have to have a different one
for each wiki, and then you have to know it, and then there are surprises.
Yeah. Well, there is this idea to have sort of a general backend for translations into any kind of format where people then just can write their own specification. But that has not materialized yet, and I'm not sure how quickly something like this will be done.
And the question is at what cost in terms of complexity, because org is nice and simple right now.
Oh yeah, no, I mean the idea would really be to basically go to an intermediate format like this list structure, and only communicate through this. Yes, yes. I don't want to make the basic format of org more complex. I think that's complex enough. Other questions? I think I saw a hand over there somewhere. No? I guess no more questions. If you have questions, if you find out you have questions, just get to our mailing list and ask me the question there. I will be happy to answer.
If you're a really hardcore Emacs hacker, join Carsten and us for lunch. We're going out to Pinterest after.
Thanks.